Something was wrong with Lisa's hands. She noticed it while scrubbing the kitchen floor at 5 in the morning. On her knees in a maid's uniform, a bucket of soapy water beside her. Her fingers were slender, her nails were long and painted red. And the strange part, the part that sent a cold ripple through her chest, was that she could not remember them ever looking any different. She sat back on her heels and stared at her hands. A thought tried to surface, something about these fingers once being thicker, rougher, belonging to someone else. But the thought dissolved before she could hold it, like smoke slipping through her grip. The voices in her head hummed their familiar melody, soft and reassuring, and the unease faded. She dipped the brush back into the bucket and kept scrubbing. Her goddess would be awake in 2 hours. There was still so much to do. But 12 hours earlier, none of this existed. There was no Lisa. There was no goddess. There was no maid's uniform, no list of chores, no bedroom down the hall where she slept alone. 12 hours earlier, there was only a man named Tom, standing in his bedroom, arguing with his wife about a costume party. And losing. "Do you want to win the prize or not?" Carol stood with her hands planted firmly on her hips, her eyes locked on her husband. "I cannot go to a costume party dressed as a woman," Tom fired back, his voice rising. "I will be the laughingstock of the entire neighborhood. You honestly expect me to walk in there, in front of people we know, wearing female clothes? Honey, it is a costume party. The whole point is to show up in something outrageous. People expect it. You are not hearing me, Carol. I am a man. You are asking me to wear the absolute worst thing imaginable." Carol let out a slow breath through her nose. This was going to require some serious persuasion. She studied her husband for a moment, then softened her approach. "Maybe once you actually get into the costume, you will feel differently about the whole thing," she offered, keeping her voice light and casual. "I seriously doubt that," Tom muttered, crossing his arms over his chest. "Would you at least try it on? Just for me?" She took a step closer, tilting her head slightly. "If you put it on and you still hate it, we stay home. No party, no argument." There it was, the perfect offer. A door left wide open for him, an easy escape route he could grab onto. But Carol understood something her husband did not. Once she had him in that costume, the game would shift entirely. She was absolutely certain of it. A small, knowing smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. She knew Tom better than he knew himself. This was going to work. Tom hesitated. His shoulders dropped an inch. "Okay," he said, his voice smaller now, almost sheepish. "But you promise me, Carol. If I do not like how it looks once I am dressed up, we are not going to that party." "Deal!" Carol said brightly, thrusting her hand forward. They shook on it, and that handshake sealed everything. Tom had just surrendered his last line of defense. There was no backing out now. He was going to put on the costume his wife had assembled for him. He stood there for a moment, resignation settling over his face like a cloud. "I suppose you're going to send me off to shave my legs now," he said flatly. "Not at all," Carol replied, and her entire tone shifted, warm and cheerful, almost musical. "I bought something special that takes care of everything. You are going to love this. Come here, look." She disappeared into the closet and emerged a moment later, carrying something Tom had never laid eyes on before. He stared at it, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The packaging had no brand name, no barcode, just a plain black box with a serial number stamped in silver ink. The thing inside appeared to be crafted from the same type of nylon material Carol used for her pantyhose, but noticeably thicker, smoother, with a faint sheen under the bedroom light that shifted when he moved his head, almost iridescent. It was surprisingly heavy for fabric, as if something had been woven into the fibers themselves. It was a full bodysuit, designed to cover the wearer from the crown of the head all the way down to the toes. Once inside it, a person would appear to have soft, completely hairless skin. The effect would be something like stepping into a diving suit, though Tom could not quite figure out how the back closure worked. But the suit held far more surprises than simple fabric. Built directly into the chest area were two generous, rounded mounds that would serve as breasts, shaped convincingly enough to pass a second glance. They were not sewn on like cheap costume padding. They seemed to be part of the material itself, integrated at a level Tom could not quite understand. Around the hips and backside, additional shaping had been carefully layered in, sculpting curves where Tom currently had none. Once he climbed inside, his straight, angular frame would transform into something unmistakably feminine. At the very top, attached near the head opening, cascaded long blonde hair, a built-in wig that flowed past the shoulders. Even the face portion had been thought through. Pigments had been embedded directly into the fibers across the features, a blush on the cheeks, shadow above the eyes, a tint on the lips, so the wearer would appear to already have a full face of makeup the instant the suit was on. All Tom had to do was step inside, and he would become an instant woman. Whatever this thing was, it was far beyond any costume he had ever seen. See? Carol held the suit up, turning it slowly so he could take in every detail. It will not be bad at all. You slip into this, I help you with the rest of the outfit, and you're going to look so incredible that first prize is practically ours. I guess, Tom said. His voice carried no enthusiasm whatsoever, just the flat tone of a man who had lost a negotiation and knew it. But a promise was a promise, and the handshake still lingered on his palm. He began unbuttoning his shirt, then pulled off his undershirt, resigning himself to what came next. Carol snatched up the instruction sheet that had come folded inside the packaging. The paper was dense with small print, far more detailed than any costume should require. The directions say you start by sliding your arms through the armholes first, she read aloud, scanning the paper quickly and folding it so Tom could not see the rest. She set the instructions down on the dresser and lifted the bodysuit with both hands, holding it open and ready, the armholes facing Tom. He stood bare-chested in the middle of the bedroom, staring at the suit dangling from his wife's fingers. He drew in one long, deep breath, held it for a beat, then walked toward her. Tom pushed his arms through the openings, and Carol began pulling the taut, slick fabric up and over his shoulders, smoothing it against his skin as it stretched into place. While the material had looked deceptively thin, almost fragile like ordinary nylon, Tom was surprised to discover it carried real substance. The dark hair covering his arms vanished completely beneath it, not a single strand visible through the smooth surface. He worked his hands forward through the sleeves, pushing his fingers one by one into the glove-like endings at the cuffs. Each fingertip slid into its own snug pocket, and at the very tips, long crimson fake nails jutted out, perfectly shaped, gleaming with a polished finish. Once his arms were fully through, he held his hands up and turned them slowly in front of his face. They looked nothing like his own. They looked like the hands of a woman who had just walked out of a salon. "How does it feel?" Carol asked, watching him examine his new fingers. "Kind of tight," he admitted, flexing his hands experimentally. "Do not worry about that. It should stretch out a bit once it settles, I think." She reached over and touched him lightly on the forearm, pressing her fingertips against the fabric to test its texture. Tom flinched, not from pain, but from surprise. He could feel her touch right through the material, almost as clearly as if she were pressing against his bare skin. The sensation startled him. No ordinary fabric should transmit feeling like that. He had never worn nylons or silk stockings in his life, but even those could not possibly feel like this strange, amplified awareness of every contact against the body. Following the next step in the instructions, Carol took a strap of the fabric and wrapped it carefully around his neck area, securing the upper portion of the suit. The built-in wig now tumbled down behind him, the long blonde strands brushing and tickling against his bare back. Tom looked down at his own chest and froze for a moment. The pair of breasts hung there, molded into the suit fabric just below his collarbone, waiting to be positioned. It was genuinely intimidating for him to see them dangling there against his body. They looked startlingly realistic, full and rounded, the tips slightly pointed and angled gently upward, shaped in a way that made his stomach tighten with nervous discomfort. Carol placed her palms flat against the fabric and began smoothing it downward from his neck across his chest, pressing the material against his skin and guiding the breasts into their proper position. The suit clung to him wherever she pressed, bonding to his body like a second skin. And it felt strangely, unexpectedly wonderful. Her hands moving across the fabric sent warm ripples of sensation through him that he could not explain. As the breasts settled into place against his chest, snug and weighted, Tom gasped. A sudden rush of pleasure surged through his upper body, powerful and startling, radiating outward from the points of contact. What was that? Carol paused, looking up at his face. I have no idea, he said, his voice slightly breathless. When you touched me across the chest just now, I felt this incredible sensation. It is strange how good that felt. Carol tilted her head curiously, then reached forward and touched the breasts again, this time running her fingertips in slow circles across the area where the nipples sat beneath the smooth fabric. Ooh! Tom's eyes fell shut on their own. His lips parted slightly, and his head tilted back an inch. Carol continued for several moments, watching the expression on his face shift into something close to bliss. But then a different sensation crept in and shattered the moment. The strap around his neck, the one Carol had fastened moments earlier, had begun to tighten. What had started as mild snugness now pressed in steadily, growing uncomfortable, edging toward constriction. Tom reached up with his gloved fingers and tried to adjust it, tugging at the fabric, but it would not budge. The material seemed locked in place, fused somehow, impossible to shift. A sudden wave of claustrophobia hit him, sharp and immediate. He grabbed at the suit lower down, trying to peel the fabric away from his torso. The instant he pulled, white-hot pain shot through him. It felt exactly as though he were trying to rip away his own skin. He released the fabric immediately, his hands jerking back. Ow! He sucked air through his teeth. This thing is stuck to me. Honey, it is supposed to stick, Carol said calmly, not even looking up from the instruction sheet. Do not try to pull it off now. We will follow the removal directions after the party. But it feels tight around my neck. His hand went to his throat again, fingers pressing uselessly against the unyielding material. It is all in your mind, Carol said, waving a dismissive hand. Do not be such a baby about it. You are already whining like a girl. She continued working her way around his torso, pressing and smoothing the suit into contact with his skin, wrapping it across his sides, along his ribcage, down toward his stomach. And despite the growing pressure at his neck, more of those pleasurable sensations kept blooming wherever the fabric met his body. Warmth radiated from every new point of contact, and his breath caught again and again as Carol worked the suit into place. Soon the material covered him from his shoulders down to his navel, clinging seamlessly, transforming the shape of his upper body into something softer and curved. If it had not been for that persistent tightness gripping his throat, the whole experience might have actually been enjoyable. Carol picked up the instruction sheet again, scanning the next steps. I need to pull the hood over your head now, she said, glancing up at him. That is what seals the back closed. And once it is sealed properly, the pressure on your neck should ease up. Okay? Tom managed, his voice tight and slightly strained from the pressure still gripping his throat. Close your eyes for me, Carol instructed. Just for a minute. Hold still. Tom obeyed, shutting his eyes and standing motionless, while Carol gathered the hood portion of the suit and began pulling it carefully over his head. The fabric slid across his scalp, cool and snug, then down over his forehead. She worked it slowly across his face, aligning each opening with precision. The eye holes settled into position first, then the small gap for his nose, then the slit for his mouth. She guided each ear through the openings on the sides, tugging gently until they seated properly. Then she placed both palms flat against his face and smoothed the material outward in slow, firm strokes, pressing it against every contour of his cheekbones, his jaw, his chin, helping the fabric bond seamlessly to his skin the way it had across the rest of his body. "Okay, dear, open your eyes," she said softly, and turned him by the shoulders to face the full-length mirror on the bedroom wall. Tom opened his eyes. His breath stopped. The person staring back at him from the mirror was, from the waist up, unmistakably a woman. The breasts were full and prominent, sitting high on the chest, with a natural weight and shape that looked completely real beneath the smooth, skin-toned fabric. The long blonde hair of the built-in wig cascaded past the shoulders, framing the face in soft waves, and it looked exactly as though it were growing from his own head. The pigments embedded in the face portion of the suit gave him high cheekbones, subtly shadowed eyes, and lips tinted a warm rose color. The overall effect was stunning. If he had not known he was looking at himself, he would have believed he was looking at an attractive woman. "We are going to win the contest," he said. The words came out, and he noticed something immediately. His voice sounded slightly different, pitched just a fraction higher than normal. Probably the tightness around his neck compressing his throat, he reasoned. He reached up and tried to find an edge to loosen, sliding his gloved fingertips along the fabric, searching for a seam or a flap he could work his fingers beneath. There was nothing. The suit sat flush against his skin, with no gap anywhere, as if it had melted into him. As he continued to stare at the reflection, a faint tingling sensation bloomed at the base of his skull, right where the hood met the back of his neck. It was subtle at first, a light prickling, almost electric. He reached back to scratch at it, but the thick mass of blonde hair blocked his fingers from reaching the spot. The sensation was not painful, but something about it felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. "I like how I look," he said aloud. His voice climbed another half-step higher. And as the words left his mouth, his posture changed without any conscious decision. His shoulders rolled back, his chest pushed forward, accentuating the shape of the breasts. His right hand drifted upward and began playing with a strand of the long blonde hair, his finger twirling it absently in a slow spiral. His mind wandered to the dress Carol had picked out, and he found himself imagining how pretty he would look once he slipped into it, how the fabric would drape over these new curves, how the whole outfit would come together. Then the alarm hit him like ice water. Something was wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. The color drained from beneath the suit's painted complexion, and his expression twisted into raw panic. "This thing is trying to control my thoughts." His voice cracked on the words, pitched now to a register he had not heard from his own throat since he was 13 years old. "I can feel it inside my mind." It was as if the suit had sent invisible tendrils down through the hood, through his scalp, burrowing into the soft tissue of his brain and planting roots there. He could feel it working, gently but relentlessly, nudging his thoughts away from their natural patterns, redirecting them down unfamiliar paths. It was trying to make him enjoy having breasts. It was trying to make him appreciate being pretty. And underneath it all, beneath every other manipulation, it was trying to make him want to put the rest of the suit on. It was trying to make him want to finish the transformation. Tom grabbed at the fabric covering his torso and pulled downward with every ounce of strength he had. Agony ripped through him. The suit had bonded to his skin so completely now that tearing at it felt exactly like trying to peel away his own flesh. He released it with a strangled cry, tears springing to his eyes. Carol stood 3 feet away, watching. She did not move. She did not reach for him. She did not grab the instruction sheet to find the removal steps. She simply watched, her expression calm, almost patient, as this thing burrowed deeper into her husband's mind and reshaped him from the inside out. "Help me!" he screamed. His voice was no longer his own. It belonged to a girl, high and clear and desperate. "Help me get the rest of this suit on!" The words hit the air, and Tom's mind recoiled in horror. No. He had not wanted to say that. The suit had pushed those words out of him, hijacking his mouth, using his own voice against him. He stood trembling. his gloved hands shaking at his sides, watching Carol's face break into a slow, satisfied smile. "Sure, honey," she said gently. She stepped toward him and placed a warm hand on his shoulder. "Now just let go. You know you cannot take it off. It is already part of you. Let me finish. You know how good it will feel once you're all the way inside it, do you not? Imagine being feminine everywhere, not just from the waist up. Imagine how wonderful that will be." Tom opened his mouth to protest, to scream, to beg her to cut this thing off of him. But the tendrils in his mind pulsed, and a wave of warm, honeyed pleasure rolled through his entire body, and the image rose unbidden in his thoughts, vivid and intoxicating, the suit covering every last inch of him, his whole body reshaped, completed, beautiful. "Yes," Tom whispered, as part of his mind surrendered to the vision and embraced it completely. A new part of his mind, a fragment that had not existed 5 minutes ago. A fragment that was thinking like a woman. War erupted inside Tom's skull. Carol knelt down and began pulling the suit over his left leg, smoothing the fabric upward from ankle to thigh. And as the material bonded to his skin, fresh waves of feminine sensation flooded his consciousness. Pleasure upon pleasure cascaded through him, each one tied to the simple, intoxicating thought of being female. The feelings were gorgeous and terrifying at the same time, because they ran against everything he had ever known himself to be. Everything that was Tom. But he could feel the suit working on him, reshaping his mind the way a sculptor reshapes clay. His thoughts had once been hard-cornered and angular, solid blocks stacked in familiar patterns he had lived with for his entire adult life. Now those blocks were softening at the edges, rounding out, compressing into smooth spheres that rolled easily in directions he had never allowed them to go. The same raw material, the same essential substance, but forced into a completely different configuration. Rearranged until the original structure was no longer recognizable. His resistance was crumbling. Every second that passed made it harder to fight, because the boundary between his own thoughts and the new ones being woven into his mind was dissolving. He could no longer sort them apart. Which impulse was his? Which desire belonged to the suit? The line blurred, then faded, then vanished entirely. He knew with cold, sinking certainty that he was being transformed, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. Carol moved to his right leg. She worked quickly now, pulling the fabric up over his calf, past his knee, smoothing it along his thigh with practiced, confident strokes. The suit swallowed his second leg just as hungrily as the first, bonding instantly, transmitting that same electric warmth through every inch of newly covered skin. Within moments, both legs were fully encased, and the shaping around his hips and backside settled into place, giving him curves that looked entirely natural in the mirror's reflection. Now the only part of him that remained untouched, the only part that was still undeniably him, was what he had between his legs. A loose flap of material hung down from the back of the suit, dangling between his thighs. Carol reached for it. She gripped the fabric firmly and drew it upward in one smooth, deliberate motion. Tom felt the material close around him, press against him, reshape him. Overwhelming pleasure erupted through his lower body, so intense that his knees nearly buckled. The fabric bonded to his skin, and he could feel everything shifting, resettling, tightening. Pressure built, and with it came wave after wave of sensation, unlike anything he had ever experienced in his life. He looked down and watched the familiar contours of his body changing before his eyes, smoothing over, flattening, becoming something entirely new. The smaller the old shape grew, the more staggering the pleasure became, as if his body was rewarding him for surrendering, thanking him for letting go. Everything that had once defined him physically was receding, pulling away like a tide retreating from the shore. And in its wake, something else entirely was emerging. Tom raised his eyes to the mirror. With the reshaped curves at his hips, the sculpted lines of his legs, and the rapidly transforming landscape between his thighs. The person in the reflection was a woman. Not a man in a costume, not a disguise. A woman. It was not him standing there. It was someone else, someone female. New thoughts pushed at the walls of his mind, pressing inward, demanding entry. They did not speak, they sang. A soft, persistent melody, repeating the same words over and over. I am a woman. He tried to resist. He planted his feet mentally and pushed back against the chorus. He tried to ignore the voices, tried to drown them out with his own thoughts, but they only grew louder, stronger, more insistent. They called to him with a sweetness that was almost unbearable, urging him to stop fighting, to give in, to become one with them. It would be so easy, like falling asleep when exhaustion has soaked into every bone. All he had to do was release his grip, stop struggling, and allow the new thoughts to flow in and take their rightful place. It would be so much easier to join them than to keep battling against them. I am a woman, the thoughts sang, their melody wrapping around every corner of his mind. Tom looked down one final time. Every trace of the old shape between his legs was gone. In its place was a soft, smooth mound, unmistakably feminine, as if it had always been there. His body had settled fully into the suit, and the suit had settled fully into him. The reflection in the mirror showed a complete woman, head to toe, every curve, every contour, every detail. I have a woman's body, he said aloud. His voice floated out high and clear, purely feminine, with no trace of the baritone that had argued with Carol just minutes ago. That is right, Carol said quietly, standing behind him, meeting his eyes in the mirror. You do. I have a woman's body. The thoughts sang inside his head, their melody growing richer now, fuller, harmonizing with itself. I'm a woman now. The tune looped and repeated, infectious, impossible to shake, like a song heard first thing in the morning that embeds itself so deeply it plays on its own for the rest of the day. The chorus inside his head swelled louder and louder, voice upon voice joining the melody, each one pulling another fragment of his conscious mind into the song. Piece by piece, thought by thought, what had once been Tom was being absorbed into the harmony. The few remaining holdouts of his old self grew quieter with each passing second, drowned beneath the rising tide. The chorus was becoming entirely female now, every voice within it high and clear and certain. Carol stepped back and studied the scene with a calm, appraising eye. She glanced once more at the instruction sheet on the dresser, then set it down with finality. She did not need it anymore. Her husband stood before the mirror, with a blank, distant stare, every ounce of his mental energy turned inward, locked in a desperate and increasingly futile battle against the feminine thoughts and impulses flooding his mind. He was consumed by the internal struggle, so completely lost inside himself that he had no awareness of anything happening in the room around him. He did not notice Carol disappear into the closet. He did not hear the rustle of fabric or the click of buckles. He did not see her emerge moments later, transformed herself, dressed now in a fitted outfit of gleaming black leather that hugged her frame, her feet planted in tall, stiletto-heeled boots that added 3 inches to her height and sharpened her posture into something commanding and absolute. Get down on your knees, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of iron. Tom dropped instantly. His knees hit the carpet without hesitation, without thought. His mind was still fighting the war within, spending every last reserve of willpower trying to hold back the feminine voices, and he had nothing left to resist Carol's command. Part of him, some distant corner, that was still recognizably Tom, wanted to push back against her too, wanted to stand up and refuse, but he understood instinctively that if he divided his resistance, if he tried to fight on 2 fronts at once, the very last fragment of his old self would be swallowed whole by the swirling chorus inside his skull. And so when Carol spoke, he obeyed. He had no choice. Obedience was the only option that allowed any piece of him to survive. While his mind struggled and thrashed internally, he failed to notice that the suit was still working on his body. His waist was drawing inward, cinching tighter, carving a narrower silhouette between his ribcage and the padded hips. The nanofibers in the hood were reshaping the contours of his face beneath the fabric, his nose narrowing slightly, refining itself into something smaller and more delicate. His cheekbones appeared to rise and become more prominent, catching the bedroom light at new angles. Even the ridge of his brow was softening, flattening, losing the heavy masculine shelf that had always shadowed his eyes. Soon his face would be entirely unrecognizable, even to himself. "Kneel before me and show your devotion," Carol commanded. Without thinking, without the faintest spark of resistance, Tom leaned forward and lowered his head until his forehead nearly touched the carpet. He held the position, bowed and still, the long blonde hair spilling around his shoulders and pooling on the floor. "You are mine now," Carol said. Her voice carried absolute authority, each word landing like a decree carved in stone. "Once you had free will to do as you pleased. That is over. From this moment forward, you belong completely to me, and you will serve me as my devoted companion. You want to serve me. You want to be mine. You are my willing one now. You exist only for me. Only I can anchor you, now that you have become a woman." Tom remained on his knees before her, and something vast and irreversible shifted inside him. He loved her. He loved her so deeply and so completely that the feeling eclipsed everything else. He did want to be hers. She would protect him. She would guide him. He would show her the depth of his devotion through every action, every word, every breath. His entire life would be dedicated to her from this moment forward. The voices continued their song inside his head, telling him over and over that he was a woman now. He had a feminine form. He was pretty. He was a woman. But even as the melody surrounded him, one final wall held firm inside his mind. Some last stubborn refusal would not let the thought take root completely. Then Carol spoke those words. "Now that you have become a woman." And everything changed. She was telling him he was a woman. Carol, his anchor, his everything. She was perfect. She was all-knowing. She could not be wrong about anything, and certainly not about this. If she said he was a woman, then he was a woman. The logic was absolute, unbreakable, final. The last wall crumbled. He stopped fighting. He opened his mind and let the symphony rush in. The chorus filled every corner of his consciousness, and instead of resisting the melody, he joined it, adding his own voice to the song, singing along with it, becoming part of it. The transition was complete. Tom was a woman now, even in her own mind. She was a woman. Completely, irrevocably. "You are no longer my husband," Carol continued, looking down at the kneeling figure before her. "You are a woman and my devoted servant. You are not Tom to me anymore. He is gone. You are a woman now, and from this moment forward, your name will be Lisa." "I am Lisa," she thought, as she remained on her knees before Carol, the chorus in her mind finally at peace, singing softly now, a single gentle note of perfect certainty. "You may rise now, Lisa," said Carol. Lisa rose smoothly from her knees, her movements already carrying a grace that had not existed in Tom's body. She stood with her weight shifted to one hip, her shoulders back, her posture instinctively feminine. She kept her eyes on Carol, waiting. Carol reached beneath her gleaming black leather skirt and produced something she had concealed there. A sleek, dark accessory, black as her leather, polished and commanding. She held it up deliberately, letting the bedroom light catch its surface. It was an emblem of her new authority, a symbol of the power she now held over every corner of their household. She pointed it forward, aimed squarely at Lisa's future. "Show me that you are devoted to me now," Carol said, her voice steady and absolute. "Prove your loyalty." Lisa leaned forward without hesitation. lowering herself in an act of complete and willing submission. Every breath she drew carried her deeper into acceptance of this new role. The last traces of resistance had long since dissolved, replaced by something that felt like reverence, pure and consuming. "From now on, I will be the one in charge of this house," Carol declared. She stood tall in her boots, her voice ringing with calm certainty. "That makes you the keeper of our home. You are the one who tends to our life together. I will lead. You will serve me in all the ways I desire. You will show me that I am your guiding star. You will honor me and please me exactly as I wish." The words sank into Lisa's mind and locked into place like bolts sliding home. Carol was her anchor. Carol was her center of gravity. Lisa wanted nothing more than to show Carol the depth of her love, to demonstrate through every action how completely devoted she had become. Carol was her guiding star now, brilliant and fixed in the sky of her new existence, and Lisa would spend every moment proving her devotion. "Now come and stand before me," Carol ordered. "I am going to show you what your new life will hold." Lisa obeyed instantly. Carol guided her through the rituals of her new existence, one by one. The gestures of devotion, the postures of service, the quiet, unspoken language of submission that would define her days from this point forward. Each new instruction settled into Lisa's body and mind as naturally as breathing, and the pleasure of belonging entirely to another person washed over her in deep, rolling waves. "This is how it feels to honor your goddess," Carol said. "Tell me that I am your goddess now." "You are my goddess," Lisa said softly, the words leaving her lips with absolute sincerity. "Tell me how devoted you are." "You are my goddess, and I live to serve you," Lisa replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want to honor you, to show you that I am yours completely. I want you to lead me always." "You want this," Carol said, and her authority deepened with every word. "This is what you live for now." "Yes," Lisa breathed, her whole body trembling with the overwhelming rightness of everything she was feeling. Every cell in her new form hummed with certainty. This was where she belonged. When Carol finally stepped back, Lisa felt the distance immediately. A chill swept through her, sharp and disorienting, as if someone had pulled a warm blanket away on a freezing night. She felt adrift, unmoored, desperate to close the gap between them. "May I remain close to you?" Lisa asked, her voice small and earnest. "Soon, my love," Carol replied warmly. "Now you will do something different for me. But first, you need to get dressed." Carol took Lisa by the hand and led her to the closet, where an outfit hung waiting on a padded hanger. She began with the first piece, a pair of bright red thong panties. Lisa stepped into them and drew them up her legs. The fabric settled against her body and laid perfectly flat across the front, smooth and seamless, conforming to a shape that was entirely new. Where once there had been a familiar contour, now there was nothing but a soft, even surface. The panties fit as though they had been made for her. Next, Carol lifted a push-up bra from the hanger and held it open. She showed Lisa how to lean forward and let her breasts settle into the cups, then guided her hands behind her back to fasten the clasp. The bra lifted and supported her generous curves, pressing them together, shaping them into an even more striking silhouette. Lisa glanced down at herself and felt a quiet thrill at how attractive they looked. Now came a frilly half-slip in white, which Lisa stepped into and pulled up to her waist. It hung to just above her knees, the lace trim brushing against her thighs with a soft whisper. Carol removed the final piece from the hanger. It was a black dress with poofy gathered sleeves, short enough to show Lisa's arms, and a skirt that flared outward from the waist. The neckline plunged in a deep cut that would expose a generous view of Lisa's impressive cleavage. Lisa raised her arms and let Carol guide the dress down over her body. It settled into place, the skirt swishing around her thighs, the bodice hugging her transformed figure perfectly. Then Carol picked up one last item, a crisp white apron. She draped it over the front of the dress, reached around Lisa's waist to gather the ties, and fastened them in a neat bow at the small of her back. Finally, she set a pair of black-heeled shoes on the floor in front of Lisa. Lisa stepped into them, and her posture shifted instantly, her calves tightening, her back straightening, her hips tilting forward. Lisa looked down at herself, and recognition clicked into place. She knew exactly what this outfit was. A maid's uniform. Carol was turning her into a maid. "You will have many duties around my house," Carol said firmly, emphasizing the word my with unmistakable ownership. She began pacing slowly in front of Lisa, her boot heels pressing into the carpet with each deliberate step. "You will keep the floors spotless. There will not be one speck of dust on any piece of furniture. I will inspect daily with a white glove, and I expect to find nothing. The dishes will be kept clean and put away properly in their correct places. You will do all of the cooking and all of the shopping." Lisa listened intently, cataloging each instruction in her mind, committing every word to memory. "In addition," Carol continued, "you will make my bed every morning with fresh hospital corners. You will wash my sheets twice a week. You will scrub the bathroom until it sparkles, change the towels daily, wipe down every mirror until there is not a single streak, and more." Lisa nodded quickly, absorbing it all. "You will gather the dirty clothes and wash them on the proper cycles. You will iron, fold, and hang everything, putting each item away neatly in its correct place. You will clean and shine my shoes as well, every pair, until they gleam. You will help me dress each morning, undress me each evening, and take care of my every need in between." "Yes, ma'am," said Lisa. Carol stopped pacing. She turned slowly and fixed Lisa with a look that could have frozen water. "No, I do not think that is good enough. I am not just a woman to you that you serve. I am not just your goddess whom you want to please. You are to worship me. You may call me goddess." "Yes, goddess," Lisa said, and sank immediately to her knees, her head bowed, the frilly skirt of the maid's uniform pooling around her on the carpet. "That is better, slave," Carol replied, a note of satisfaction warming her voice. "Now where was I? Oh, yes, your chores. You will tend to the garden, making sure that not one single weed is permitted to grow. You will sweep the sidewalk daily. You will fetch the newspaper for me each morning, bring in the mail each afternoon, take out the trash each evening. You will cook my dinner, and after you serve me a drink, you will rub my feet until I tell you to stop." "Yes, goddess," Lisa said from her knees. "I will serve you and do your bidding. All of it." "Yes, you will," Carol said. "Now rise. You will help me change into something elegant. I'm going out tonight." She walked to the closet and selected a chic little black dress, hanging it on the back of the bedroom door. The fabric was sleek and fitted, designed to turn heads. "Help me out of this outfit, slave," she ordered. Lisa rose and moved to Carol's side. She found the zipper at the back of the leather and drew it down slowly, then eased the gleaming material away from Carol's shoulders and down her body with careful, reverent hands. As the leather fell away, Lisa's gaze lingered on the sleek emblem of Carol's authority, the commanding accessory she still wore. Lisa's expression turned almost wistful as Carol unfastened it and set it aside on the dresser. "You will care for this for me," Carol instructed, nodding toward the item. "I will have quite a collection of symbols of my power soon, and you will be in charge of making sure that every one of my tokens of authority is kept with care, cleaned properly, and ready for me whenever I desire them." "Yes, goddess," Lisa said, her eyes bright with eagerness. She helped Carol into an elegant shelf bra, adjusting the straps with gentle, attentive fingers until the fit was perfect. Then she took a pair of dark silk stockings and rolled each one carefully into a compact ring. She knelt at Carol's feet and guided the first stocking over her toes, drawing it slowly and smoothly up her calf and along her thigh, making sure there were no wrinkles in the delicate fabric. She repeated the process with the second leg, just as carefully. Carol stepped into a black garter belt, and Lisa attached the clasps to the stocking tops, securing each one with a soft click. Finally, Lisa lifted the little black dress from the door and helped Carol step into it, drawing it up over her hips and settling it onto her shoulders. She fastened the back and then reached up to straighten the thin straps, making sure each one sat perfectly. "There was a man named Tom," Carol said quietly, while Lisa's fingers smoothed the fabric across her shoulders. "I found out one day that he was unfaithful to me, with a colleague from his work. Do you not think that was wrong of him?" "Yes, goddess. Very wrong," Lisa replied without hesitation. Carol studied her own reflection in the mirror, turning slightly to check the line of the dress. "And so I have decided that I deserve the same liberty. I am going out tonight to spend time with a man. A real man. I am going to let the evening take its natural course, wherever it may lead. Does that not seem fair to you, slave?" "Yes, goddess." "Very fair," Lisa answered. Carol picked up a folded piece of paper from the dresser and placed it in Lisa's gloved hand. "Here is a list of chores for you to begin immediately," she said. "Once every single task is completed to my satisfaction, you may rest quietly and reflect on your new life. Let your imagination wander freely." "Thank you, goddess," Lisa said softly, as she lifted a delicate silver necklace from the jewelry box and draped it around Carol's neck. Her gloved fingers worked the tiny clasp with surprising deftness, securing it on the first try. She stepped back to admire how the chain caught the light against Carol's collarbone. Lisa walked ahead to the front door and held it open, standing aside with her head slightly bowed as Carol swept past her and out into the evening. The scent of Carol's perfume lingered in the doorway for a moment after she disappeared. Lisa watched until the car pulled away from the curb, then closed the door gently and turned the deadbolt. She looked down at the piece of paper in her hand. The list was long. There was much work to do. The first instruction was clear. Carol wanted Lisa to move out of the master bedroom and into the guest room down the hall. Lisa did not deserve the privilege of sharing space with her goddess. That room belonged to Carol alone now. And so, Lisa set about transforming the small guest room into her own quarters. Several boxes and shopping bags sat stacked in the corner, all filled with clothes Carol had purchased for her in advance. Lisa opened each one and began putting everything away, hanging dresses and blouses neatly in the narrow closet, folding undergarments and stockings into the dresser drawers, lining up 3 pairs of heeled shoes along the closet floor. Then came the harder task. Lisa returned to the master bedroom and opened the closet where Tom's clothes still hung. Button-down shirts, slacks, ties draped over a rack, a worn leather belt, sneakers on the floor. None of these belonged here anymore. There were no men in this house now. The clothes were useless. Lisa pulled a large garbage bag from under the sink and began removing the items one by one. She folded each shirt carefully before placing it in the bag, creased each pair of trousers along the seams, paired the socks together. Even though the clothes meant nothing to her new self, some instinct insisted they be treated with care on their way out. She filled 3 bags, carried them downstairs one at a time, and set them by the front door. Tomorrow, she would take them to the donation center. With all that extra space now open in the master closet, Lisa gathered Carol's belongings from various spots around the house: jackets draped over chairs, scarves folded in a hallway cabinet, shoes tucked beneath the living room couch, and carried them upstairs. She organized everything by type and color, spacing the hangers evenly, arranging the shoes in neat rows. She was just sliding the last pair into place when she heard a key turn in the front door lock, followed by the sharp, familiar click of heels crossing the hardwood entryway. Lisa hurried to smooth the final items into position and stepped back from the closet just as Carol appeared in the bedroom doorway. Carol walked slowly past Lisa and into the closet, her eyes sweeping over every hanger, every shelf, every pair of shoes. She ran one finger along the edge of a shelf and checked it for dust. Finding none, she nodded. "Nice work," she said. She crossed the hall and inspected Lisa's new room as well. The bed was made with tight corners. The clothes were put away. The surfaces were clear. Carol nodded her approval once more. "You do not deserve to sleep in the same room as I do," she said, turning back to face Lisa. "Unless it is on the floor at my feet. You will live in your own room, so that when I have men come over, I can be with them in my bed without you disturbing us." "Yes, goddess," Lisa said obediently. Carol walked into the master bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, crossing her legs. She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright, the little black dress still clinging to every curve. "I was with a real man tonight," she said, her voice warm with satisfaction. "We had a wonderful time together. He was attentive and generous. I enjoyed every moment of the evening." "I am happy for you, goddess," Lisa replied, and she meant it completely. "I had such a marvelous evening," Carol continued, leaning back on her palms. "Now kneel before me and show your gratitude that I have returned home safely. Your devotion is the finest welcome I could receive." "Yes, goddess." Lisa sank to her knees before Carol, bowing her head in complete submission. Carol stood above her, tall and radiant, glowing with feminine authority and the lingering warmth of her evening out. "Show your devotion," Carol ordered. "Remind me why I keep you." "Yes, goddess," Lisa whispered. She took Carol's hand gently in both of hers, raised it to her lips, and pressed them there, holding the kiss against Carol's skin as an act of pure reverence. As Lisa knelt and attended to her, Carol continued to speak, her voice drifting above Lisa like music. "It felt so wonderful to be courted by a real man," she said, a dreamy note entering her tone. "I will definitely go out with him again. Next time, I will bring him here, so you can see the man who captures my heart. You will witness our happiness firsthand." She paused, then smiled down at the top of Lisa's bowed head. "Perhaps someday I will arrange for you to meet men too. We can go out together, and both of us can find companions. Will that not be an adventure? Now show me your complete dedication." Carol closed her eyes and let her head fall back slightly. It felt exquisite to have her devoted servant kneeling at her feet, worshipping her with such earnest tenderness. A slow, deep smile spread across her face. Tom was so far gone in his mind now that he thought of himself entirely as a woman and her willing slave. The expensive bodysuit had been worth every single cent she had paid for it. Of course, there had also been promises made to the man who sold it to her, arrangements that still needed to be fulfilled. Soon, she would begin introducing Lisa to her new social life, guiding her into the world as the woman the suit had created. But the details could wait. Tonight, Carol simply savored the quiet perfection of her victory, the soft press of Lisa's lips against her hand, and the absolute certainty that everything had gone exactly according to plan. When Carol finally felt satisfied with Lisa's display of devotion, she lifted her hand away and placed it firmly on Lisa's shoulder. "That is enough. You may stop now." Lisa remained on her knees for a moment longer, reluctant to break the connection, before rising slowly to her feet. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her apron, her eyes still lowered, waiting. "It is time for you to go to your room," Carol said. "Set your alarm for 4:30 in the morning. You have quite a long list of chores ahead of you, and I expect every one of them completed before I open my eyes. When I wake at 7, you will have my breakfast made, my coffee poured, and waiting at the correct temperature, a bath drawn to exactly the warmth I prefer, and every other task on that list finished. Do you understand?" "Yes, goddess," Lisa said. She dipped her head once more, then turned and walked down the hallway toward the guest room. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood. The frilly hem of the maid's uniform swayed gently with each step. The long blonde hair swung between her shoulder blades like a golden pendulum. Carol stood in the doorway of the master bedroom and watched her go. She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded loosely across her chest, and let the silence of the house settle around her like a warm cloak. What a day it had been! She replayed it in her mind, savoring every moment. The morning had begun with a reluctant husband who could not imagine anything more humiliating than wearing a woman's costume to a neighborhood party. A man who had crossed his arms and raised his voice and insisted that he would never, under any circumstances, allow himself to be dressed in female clothing. That man was gone now, completely and irreversibly gone. In his place walked a devoted servant who thought of Carol as a goddess, who knelt at her feet without hesitation, who whispered words of worship with absolute sincerity, and who had just spent the entire evening scrubbing, organizing, folding, and transforming the house according to Carol's precise instructions, all while wearing a maid's uniform and red thong panties. Carol walked to the vanity and sat down. She removed her earrings one at a time and placed them in the jewelry box. She unclasped the silver necklace that Lisa had so carefully fastened around her neck hours earlier. She studied her own reflection in the mirror and smiled at the woman looking back at her. There was a new light in her eyes tonight, a confidence, a command, a quiet ferocity that had been building for months and had finally found its full expression. She thought about Tom, not the Lisa who had just walked down the hallway, but the Tom who had existed before. The Tom who had come home late smelling of unfamiliar perfume. The Tom who had fumbled through clumsy excuses about working overtime. The Tom who had betrayed her trust with a colleague and assumed she would never discover the truth. How wrong he had been about that. How catastrophically wrong he had been about everything. Carol had found the messages on his phone 3 months ago. She had read every single one of them, her hands trembling, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. And in that moment, sitting alone on the edge of their bed at 2 a.m, something inside her had shifted permanently. The grief lasted one night. By morning, it had hardened into something far more powerful, a decision, a plan, and the patience to execute it perfectly. She had spent weeks researching. She had found the suit through channels she never would have imagined exploring before. The man who sold it to her had explained everything. How the nanofiber fabric bonded with the wearer's skin. How the neural filaments in the hood would gradually interface with the brain's neural pathways. How the process, once begun, could not be reversed. He had warned her. He had made her sign documents. And he had extracted promises of his own, arrangements that Carol fully intended to honor when the time was right. The suit had cost more than their car. Carol had paid without blinking. Now, as she sat at her vanity removing her makeup with slow, deliberate strokes, she felt no guilt. Not one flicker. Tom had made his choices. He had chosen to betray her, to lie to her face night after night, to treat their marriage as something disposable. And now Carol had made her choices in return. The difference was that Carol's choices were permanent. She stood and unzipped the little black dress, letting it fall to the floor in a dark pool of fabric. She stepped out of it, removed the garter belt and stockings, and changed into a silk nightgown that whispered against her skin. She pulled back the freshly made covers on the king-sized bed, the bed that was now hers alone, and slid between the cool sheets. The house was perfectly silent. Somewhere down the hall, Lisa was setting an alarm for 4:30, preparing to wake in the darkness and begin her new life of service. She would rise before dawn every morning from now on. She would cook and clean and polish and scrub. She would kneel when told to kneel and stand when told to stand. She would worship Carol with every fiber of her being, and she would do it joyfully, because the suit had reshaped her mind so thoroughly that servitude felt like bliss. And soon, new chapters would unfold. Carol pictured the evenings ahead, bringing her new man home, letting Lisa serve them dinner, watching Lisa's face as she witnessed her goddess being adored by someone strong and real. And then the next phase, the promises Carol had made to the man who sold her the suit. Lisa would begin her own social life, guided carefully into the world as a woman, meeting men of her own. What a fascinating transformation that would be to witness. The final evolution from everything Tom had been into everything Lisa would become. Carol reached over and turned off the bedside lamp. Moonlight spilled through the curtains and painted silver stripes across the empty side of the bed. She stretched out luxuriously, spreading her arms wide, claiming every inch of the mattress. Instead of an unfaithful husband, she now had a loyal servant who worshipped the ground she walked on. She could date any man she desired, live exactly as she pleased, and come home each night to a spotless house, a hot meal, and a devoted companion who existed only to make her happy. The power she held was absolute, intoxicating, and entirely earned. And the most beautiful part, the detail that made Carol smile widest as sleep began to pull her under, was that Lisa was happy too. In her reshaped mind, nothing in the world could bring her more pleasure than serving her goddess. There would be no resentment, no rebellion, no bitter mornings of regret. Only contentment, only devotion, only the sweet, endless melody of those feminine voices singing in perfect harmony inside her head. Carol closed her eyes. The silk sheets were cool against her skin. The house was immaculate. Tomorrow morning, fresh coffee would be waiting for her when she woke. A warm bath would be drawn. Breakfast would be served on the good china. And Lisa would be standing by the bedroom door in her maid's uniform, head bowed, hands clasped, ready to begin another day of worship. "It is good to be the goddess," Carol whispered into the darkness, and drifted into a deep, triumphant sleep.